So our unhealthy pattern that we're going to first talk about here is this pattern of going quiet, going silent. And you want to share the story?
Yeah, this harkens back, quite a while ago to we got married young. I had the girls about 5, 6 years into our marriage, and we had always decided on 2 kids.
So context, I always say this. We have twin daughters, 26 years old. So when Melissa says a long time ago, it might have been longer than some of you are alive. So go ahead.
Very true. And we had always planned on just 2 children. I had a hard pregnancy. It was hard. Having twins is a unique experience. I knew nothing else. And even though we had decided on just the 2, in my head, as they got a little bit older, 2, 3 years old, I was like, it'd be kind of nice to have one.
So share the one story. One day you were sitting folding maternity clothes, right? Let's give the real story. You set the background. Melissa wanted more kids.
The real story is I was folding maternity clothes that I had found in a closet. We were purging that week. We do that a lot. And we were purging and I found them and I had washed. So I was going to give them to Goodwill. And I had washed them and was folding them. And as I was folding them, I noticed I was a little bit sad. And so I reflected on that. And the sadness was, I think I kind of wanted another child. But that was not something that we ever discussed, having more than 2. I don't think ever.
No.
It was not.
Move on. Come on. You're all up in your feels. Move on with the story.
I did get all up in my feels. And I brought it up to you.
I quickly slapped it down and said, no. Very rude and probably aggressively. No. What did I say?
You had said, I thought we had decided on 2. Where's this coming from? Because I hadn't shared it. And you said, I really thought we were done. And so I went into my quiet face. I said, okay, with tears in my eyes.
So we will get into this. Melissa, and now this is with a lot of reflection and a lot of retrospection, and we'll discuss this in a little bit. But Melissa has a tendency to go quiet and avoid conflict. Continue.
Exactly. And this silence lasted a while.
Days, weeks.
Probably months.
Probably through the summer months.
I think I brought it up a couple times. We talked about it in a cursory way. But for the most part, I just kind of hoped, I think, that you would just randomly change your mind without discussion, because it's a difficult topic. I wanted something that you did not. And that was unusual for us.
Let's pause there for a second. So you're sitting here having this internal dialogue and maybe not having a honest conversation with me about how much you would like to have another kid. In my perspective, I don't think the moment of you saying, hey, I'd like to have another kid was this big life moment. I thought it was you up in your feels throwing maternity clothes away. And you and I had always talked about having 2, and I was pretty settled with that. So I think in the first days and maybe weeks of you thinking on this, I didn't even realize there was an issue going. Because I thought it was a throwaway conversation. We're like, yeah, I don't really want more kids. We're good. Let's move on.
Yes, because I did not communicate
that.
So
you perceived it one way. I perceived it another way. My perception in the early days was I didn't even know we had an issue. Continue.
You did not.
Issue number 1 with going silent on your partner. They might not have a clue that you've gone silent. Continue.
Yes, and as we'll discuss later, this isn't the only time I've done this. And
thus the unhealthy patterns. Go on.
Right? And that's why we're illustrating this up front.
Yeah.
And so eventually I finally stopped going silent because we had to. We were just bouncing around. It was a roller coaster of emotions for me, probably less so for you, but it was.
There was a part where it became obvious, okay, wait, Melissa's holding on to this longer than I thought. I thought we had a throwaway conversation. You were obviously having, a symphony of conversations in your mind. So I realized there was something going on, but it wasn't my conversation necessarily to drill in on because you go on.
Yeah, I had to bring it up because it was just eating at me. We did have one final discussion. You said something that was very impactful, and
share. I like to look good at times, so go ahead.
Good. You turned to me and said, "We decided on 2. I'm seeing that is not a decision that you're happy with right now, even though I'm fine with the way our family is."
I was more than fine. I was very comfortable and happy with our family. It wasn't fine, but go on.
Okay. Comfortable with where we are. You said, if this is going to be something that you look back on and truly regret, I am willing to have another child. And I was able to take from that. And I said, okay, I need to think. And I took from that. I spent a couple of days, it was in silence because I was working through it on my
A
own.
different kind of silence, a reflection period where it's like,
Mm-hmm.
hey, let me sit with this for a while. Now, you shared on an earlier episode, really the internal dialogue that was going on during those intervening days. Maybe I'll put a link in there because it's a really good story. You've done the emotional share on what
Right.
you went through. Even in that, sitting in an intentional silence, I didn't realize how deep you were going into the thought on there because, again, our communication wasn't great on it. But the point for this part is eventually we had the conversation.
Yes.
The resolution of it is much less actually relevant for this conversation than the fact that we finally had the hard conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And I say conversation, it was multiple conversations.
Yes.
We finally had a series of multiple conversations. We stopped the stonewalling.
Mm-hmm.
But that was a pattern that was very well established. So do you want I already said we had 2 kids, so we know the resolution of this story.
It was, I went, you know what? I am also happy with having the 2 kids. The experience of having a singleton, if that would happen, because there was always a chance we'd have another set of twins, wasn't worth not upsetting you, but I realized it wasn't that important to me. It was more the idea that was important to me, not the actual thing. So when you said you would do that for me, and I was like, wow, that sacrifice. I don't think he needs to do that. We're good.
So to put a button on that particular story, the emotional roller coaster of that was actually a much larger story than what we just shared. I'll put a link to the previous episode. You did a fantastic share on there where I was like, oh shit, I didn't realize that. And, I don't know that you were really doing that for me or not doing that for me or whatever. It's a much more complicated decision. But for the context of this illustrates a pattern of sort of shutting down and not fully communicating. And this is a pattern we'll go into that repeated quite a while in our relationship. And that was actually one of those moments that sort of started us down the path of like, oh crap, we actually might need to fix this particular pattern. This is not a healthy pattern. I
Correct.
think that's our ink moment. That was
Yes.
a very detailed exploration of
I know.
stonewalling.
But I do want to throw in there, if anybody wants to know, I have not regretted it to this day.
No, she wakes up every day pissed.
I do
at
not.
me.
Not once. The girls started kindergarten a couple years later,
Life got
I
easier.
had some free time, and I was able to return to work. And I was like, "Ooh, 2 kids is great." And I haven't. Nope, not once have I looked back and gone, "I wish we would have had a third."
Awesome.